Today on Between the Lines, beloved singer and songwriter Janis Ian. I'm Barry Kibrick. Janis Ian catapulted into the spotlight at the age of 15 when her soul-wrenching song Society's Child became a huge hit. Later, when she released her legendary At 17, she achieved worldwide fame. After 7 hit albums in as many years, she chose to walk away from the music industry. But when she returned a decade later, she continued to give the world her beautiful music. And now with her autobiography, Society's Child, Janis gives us an honest account of her successes and her failures and leaves us with a message of hope and gratitude.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old. And it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of corruption.
You don't get a chance to really talk about what's real, and it's the perfect community.
Janis, welcome to the show. You know,
Thank
you could already tell by all the people that have been coming up to you. This is very exciting for us, especially. I'm going to foreshadow a little something I haven't done before. Is you are going to sing for us a little bit at the end of the show. So, viewers, you are in for a treat. Stay tuned. Janis, I'm going to begin with the beginning. You use these words. It sounds funny, but
it was a dark and
but I'll tell you
stormy
the
night.
reason why. Because it's a theme throughout your book as well, and it's a theme of this show. And it's these words: I was born into the crack that split America. I remember having heard the Leonard Cohen song. You ever heard there's a crack in everything?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
how the light,
gets in.
And whether it's your album Between the Lines, as you've done with At 17, or just that first line, the crack is such an important place to be.
Well, there's that chasm, you know, and I think that the world is built on chasms. There's the chasms that that we create between ourselves through race and nationality and language and all of the 101 ways we separate ourselves from each other. And then there's the chasm of the 60s, where there were those people on this side and us people on the other side. And then there's the chasm that artists try to cross. And to me, part of our job is to cross that chasm and to make sense out of the chaos of daily life. And then there's just the chasm of, oh my God, I have a life, what am I doing with it?
Well, you know, you mentioned before when we were talking, you mentioned Stella Adler, and she's a big part in the book, and even the talk about the chasms and how, you know, you said about within yourself even. She says that artists, you learned, they have to ride that up and down, that success, that non-success, that creativity, that no creativity. And I think the line was, they can't pay you enough to do that. It has to be out of something that comes within the crack in your soul.
Absolutely. Well, I think Stella once said to an actor, she asked him why he was an actor, and he shrugged and said, well, I guess I want to be famous. And she said, no, darling. You're an actor because there is something in you too big to get out any other way. And I thought, oh my God, if I were 18 hearing that for the first time, what a revelation that would be for me. Because we all know that if you're an artist, if you're born an artist, you would be doing this for nothing. It doesn't matter if you succeed or not, you still do it. It's the business of failure. It's the business of falling down and getting up with no hands to help you. But that's what you live for.
You know, you said if you were 18, and what's always made you interesting is you came into this world at 15, at 14. You wrote your first song at 12, and I heard it on your album. I didn't even hear your answer, but I know my son was talking to you about it. How did it sound so good even at 12 years old?
Well, that's your son's thought that it sounds good. To me, it sounds pretty awful, but...
It's beautiful.
Well, it's the gift. You know, there's a point where I think most songwriters, I don't know about book writers, but most songwriters I know are pretty humble. And in large part, it's because we know that we were born with the talent. We didn't do anything to get it.
Well, you know, you even in the book, you say your father loved music, but to you, music was sacred. So it really is, it's literally transcendent. You felt, in fact, it's kind of funny. You were one of the children of the 60s who was raised by atheists, yet you felt God, and it must have been because of this
My
talent.
mother considered it her great failure. But my brother and I both wound up believing in God, and she couldn't understand why we needed that, how did she put it, crutch. She couldn't understand why we needed the crutch. Where had she failed us? But I think the problem with parents like mine is they left the bookshelves open. They left us to make our own decisions, and sometimes those weren't the decisions they'd prefer.
There's a line that intrigued me. I want to read it and hear your comments on it. The moments you remember in your life as an artist, talking about the artist, are never the endings, always the beginnings.
Well, I think that's very true. It's like when people say, okay, what are the highlights in your career? And they expect you to say, oh, when I got my Grammys. Oh, when I had my first platinum record. Really, the highlights are things like hearing an Ella Fitzgerald say that she knows your work. Those are the beginnings, because then you think, oh my gosh, other singers are listening. That's the beginning of realizing that you're actually having an effect on your peers, on your own community.
And because of the songs you wrote, from Society's Child to 17, which people are the most aware of, but man, I've been listening to the whole autobiography album, all of them, well, you know, you used it. I'm going to find this for a second, because I want to, at a time when people didn't speak about ugly things, I was singing about it. And yet you always wanted to make sure that no matter how deep you got, no matter how soulful, and no matter how ugly it might have felt, you left your listeners with hope, with redemption.
Redemption is a good word. I believe in redemption. I remember reading, well, this sounds terribly intellectual, which I'm not, but I remember reading Camus on the death penalty, and he said that he was against it because you had no right to assume that a soul couldn't find redemption, sooner or later. And I thought about that a lot, because I was very pro-death penalty for a long time, and then I came around to his way of thinking, and I think that's true of almost everything. Unless you've got a mad dog, a Dahmer, somebody who is so obviously lacking in any sense of humanness, not just humanity, everyone deserves a shot at redemption. And some of us just keep finding shots at redemption throughout our careers, or hope for it.
Well, you know, that's, I think when you read an autobiography like this, some of the most, to me, the part that grabs me the most and that allows me to draw something out is the failures. Not the failures so much from the fact that you failed as a musician, but the failures that you feel about yourself. You kept, even in the book, saying that, you know, you had these expectations you couldn't live up to. I don't know who doesn't feel that. And what is more painful than a failed expectation, a feeling of it?
It's the monkey on your back, too. I think if you're an artist, I mean, I've never heard of an artist who looks at the people below them or less talented than them and goes, oh, I'm better than they are. You know, you're always looking up at the people who are better than you and going, I aspire to be Leonard Cohen. You know, why can't I be Leonard Cohen? You're always looking up, not down. So when you fail, which eventually you accept is just part of the job, I think you stop beating yourself up so much as you get older, and you realize that you learn from failure as much as you learn from success, and maybe more. And you get a little more comfortable. And your idea of what's a failure changes, too. I mean, when I was 21, a failure was not having a hit record. Now a failure would be not earning a living. It's quite a big gulf.
But you bridged those gulfs. The one thing that I found, I guess uplifting to myself was, and your life, there's tragedies. You had a marriage with this Tina that, I mean, I wanted to jump through the book. I mean, and just punch this guy 3 times over.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. I wish I was there for you at the time. But you know, the personal little ups and downs, even, in fact, I got to say one thing. Even when you wrote Society's Child, I remember this in the book, you said you didn't even want to blame society. And at the very end, you added an extra little babe in there, which gave the girl the permission to dump the guy.
That's right.
And you always seem to have that within you. I mean, I call it, in a weird way, it's a rugged American individualism to a certain extent.
It is. I mean, I'm second-generation American. I'm supposed to be the pioneering stock that becomes the American dream. And if there's an American dream out there, it's me. I mean, my grandparents come from Russia and Poland. My parents start out on a chicken farm. My dad works his way up to a teacher. My mom becomes a fundraiser. I reject college and become this famous star as a kid. You know, and 57, I'm still standing. How much more American can you get?
But you know, it's at times, there were times when I was reading this, not knowing where you were currently, one could say, is she going to come out of this? It almost seems like,
no, I died.
You know, well, you know you didn't die, but we don't know how you're going to come out of it. And that inner strength is what I think we're all searching for, because we can talk the talk, we can hear it all the time, But to feel it in there, as you said, you finally realized there was one thing that no one could take away from you. You had a whole big problem with the IRS and a guy named Granite, and there's one thing that they could never take, and that was your talent, your gift, your education, all that stuff that stays within.
But that's where I think you realize sooner or later that you're born a writer, or you're born an artist, you're born to whatever, because the driving force for me has always been the work, the writing, first and foremost. I mean, above my husband, above anything, it's always been the writing. That's what, I don't even know how to put it. That's the phoenix rising from the ashes. That's stepping back into the ashes deliberately, knowing that you'll burn up. I mean, that sounds terribly romantic, but it's not actually. It's just getting up when everybody else is saying, stay down, and you're going, no, must stand up.
Well, and in fact, that's the exact quote that Stella uses, isn't it? That's the one where she says about the phoenix. That's what the artist does, go up and down, and then you keep marching forward. And again, I want to take this back now, though, to the crack. Because as I said, at 17, you put on the album Between the Lines, and Stella asks you even, Janis, what are you singing when you sing those notes? And you say, I'm not singing those notes. I'm singing what's between them.
Yeah, she said, she didn't even say my name. I'm not sure she knew my name at that point. But she said, you, when you sing, what do you sing? Do you sing the notes? And I thought about it, and I said, no, I sing the space between the notes. Because that's what art is, it's the space.
Speaking of space, may I give you another line that it just triggered on me? The distance, the space from song to stage, the inner distance is too wide.
Well, chick singers, we whine a lot.
Oh, I didn't think it was whining. I must tell you, by the way, great line, because that's the one thing you do not do here is whine. In fact, if anything, you get a little piece at yourself for not being as tough as you should be.
I don't know if it's tough so much as, for me, there have been ups and downs throughout my life, yes. It's a bit soap opera-ish here and there, but it's nowhere near as difficult as somebody raising 5 kids as a single mom working in a factory. You know, I mean, my life could be, and could always have been, a whole lot worse. When I watched my mom decline with multiple sclerosis, you know, I'm standing. My partner says, any day that you're vertical and breathing on your own, that's a good day. And again, it's all perspective. It's how you look at it. You can take the long view, which is what I try to do, or you can take the immediate view of, I want mine now. Well, you can't always have yours now.
Well, you know, you mentioned your mom. You've sort of lent your voice to parts of our generation. In fact, as I said to you, did you get many comments about how many guys related to 17? And you were stunned that there were so many.
That was the big surprise, yeah.
You know, because I remember hearing it, and you now talk about your mom. And now we're in a generation, and my wife, same about age, and just experienced about last year when her mom went through passing. We're now experiencing, as the baby boomers are growing up, that next generation as our parents begin to wither and the experiences that we have to deal with.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I say in the book that in this country there's no roadmap for that. There's no roadmap for death. There's no roadmap for getting old gracefully or with any dignity. And yet, I realized one day after both my parents were gone that I was an orphan. And I never expected to be an orphan. And I'm finding that in our age group, that's what happens. You're an orphan, and the flip side of that is you're suddenly liberated because for the first time in your life, there's truly no one to answer to anymore. You're on your own. And it's at once wonderful and horrible.
You know, with that in mind, you have, I wrote down, Janis has tons of epiphanies and revelations. That's it.
But that's what you live for,
No,
isn't
no,
it?
I do. In fact, I joke all the time. I tell them with my son, I keep saying, I've had another epiphany. He goes, no, that's more of a revelation, Dad. That is not an epiphany. Epiphany is when you do this. A revelation is when you do. So I wanted to mix them both. You have both of them in here, epiphanies and revelations. And one of them was when, just as I keep thinking, can it get any worse for Janis? Even though you're not a whiner in here.
That's terrible.
But but you know what it was? It was that one period. There was this one when you come down.
There was that one really bad 10 years there.
It was
yeah.
that, and you come.
That's 10 years blue.
And when you come down with that chronic fatigue syndrome, okay, so that's.
Okay, what else are you going to throw at me? Fine. Now I can't work either. All right.
But then something again. Call it epiphany. Call it revelation. I'll ask Eli when I'm done. What does he want to call this? you begin to realize, I'll read it exactly, I was learning to accept acts of kindness. It made me feel powerless at first, but I came to realize there was just as much power in taking as in giving.
See, I wouldn't call that an epiphany. I would call that a gestalt.
Uh,
I would call that a moment when you look around and the whole world kind of rocks on its axis and then settles back down, but you know that everything is forever different. It was a shock to me. It's still a shock to me when people are just randomly kind. And I don't know if it's because I don't expect it, or because the society doesn't lead us to expect it, or because I try to practice that myself and it's surprising to watch it come back at me.
well, you know, I almost think it plays off of another line I'm going to give that you wrote, and that was, in general, I think God knows what he's doing, even though I often disagree. So sometimes I almost sense that there's an element of that plays off on this.
Absolutely, absolutely. I had an ex-lover, Kai, who came in one day and I was yelling at God, and she was a Pentecostal Christian at the time, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm yelling at God. What does it look like I'm doing?" And she looked at me with horror and she said, "You can't yell at God?" And I said, "I can't. Watch me." And I said, "Do you have any idea what you've just done to me?" I think part of it's being Jewish. You know, part of it is the expectation as a Jew that you have a one-on-one relationship with God that in many ways is equal, even as you stand in fear and trembling and sickness unto death, as it were.
Well, when I've had authors who brought that up, I always like to point out that the word Israel means to wrestle with God. And you're right, that's what you were doing. That's the job.
That's the job.
You know, Janis, I don't know if you can respond to people, but I know that, as you say in fact, I wasn't even going to do it until I read it on the back of the album. I didn't read it on the back of the book, but your website, and it says there's lots of goodies there for people. Can I give it out whether you respond to them or not? Let me give out your website.
I read my email. I can't respond to all of it, but I do read it.
All right. It's www.janisian.com. Very simple.
Named after
very
me.
easy to
Or
find
me.
out. I want to follow up on this thing. Things work out if you let them. And I go back in the other line. It's the in-between that's hard.
So true.
And we go back to that in-between, what lays between. And it takes a long time to have that serenity, that you know things are going to work out.
Or to even have it for a few minutes here and there.
That's when I say I had the epiphany, actually, if I
Right.
just get that for just a few minutes and hold on to it. Isn't it? It's amazing. And people, I know I run into people and they go, by now, you know, you've read every book that could possibly give you insight into this. It's nothing. It doesn't sit in there all the time. It just keeps flowing away.
Yeah, you know, I think for some people, the journey is about reaching the end. But for people like me, the journey is about the journey. I don't really care about reaching the end. I don't care if I find what I'm looking for. I care about how I get there, what I see on the way. That's the fun part. That's why it never stops. That's why you can't possibly find everything you need to know. You can't, because it's the journey. As long as you're on the path, there's stuff happening around you.
Well,
She said profoundly. Thank you very much.
she surely did say that profoundly. In fact, that's how, you don't even know this, but I'm going to end our show that way, and you'll see how we play that out in a few moments, because I take even a deep breath as I'm about to say it. We can't see that forest through the trees. We're just unaware as human beings to be able to appreciate that journey. As my friend John Pelz used to say, sure, I could appreciate the journey if I knew it was going to be okay when it's all done.
But that's half the fun. You don't know it's going to be okay. And yet you know that so long as you're living and you're breathing, something will be happening.
I want to play off of a few more things. You know, you mentioned your lover, and you were one of the first. You were outed almost at first when Between the Lines came out.
Oh, there's no almost about it.
Yeah, and now, by the way, if there's anything in this book that I think will be a revelation, not an epiphany necessarily, is how much we have changed as a society since Society's Child came out, whether it's with race, whether it's with sexuality.
It's huge.
It is huge. In fact, it's a shift. It's a paradigm shift in our thinking and our evolution
Absolutely.
over those somewhat 30 to 40 years.
But it takes generations. It takes changing hearts. You know, I think that's where movements tend to forget themselves. You forget that Yes, you need the political process. You need the Dred Scott decision. You need the California marriage. You need it to go to the Supreme Court. You need the politics to change and the laws to change. But at the same time, you need some time for another generation coming up to go to school with blacks and whites together in the same classes, to date without thinking twice about it. And then another generation for gay kids like I was to be able to ask each other to the prom. It takes time. There's no getting around it. It takes time.
Your appreciation for this is seen throughout the book. That's why I wanted to really emphasize you're not a whiner. You don't whine about, you don't whine about the society.
I'm sure my partner Pat would disagree with that.
No, you're not. And in fact, I spoke with my wife and my son the other night about it. I said, there's truly an Americana with Janis even. There is an appreciation of the freedom. You'd come from another country. You just say, maybe they are all ahead of us. But when you come back on this soil, you felt a kinship, you felt a soulfulness that's unbelievable.
Yeah, you go to, well, I was in Franco's Spain, you know, where you couldn't raise your voice above a whisper. You go to a totalitarian, a truly fascist country, and then come back to America, thanking God that you're here. I mean, that sounds so jingoist, I'm sorry, but it's a great country, it's a great experiment, and it's an experiment. You know, that's what I don't understand about some of the politicians now, because they think that democracy is so easily exported. And it's not. You know, it's built on criminals and pensioners and day laborers and people who had nowhere else to go and had an investment in this system that they had to make it work. And that's how I feel about it still. It's got to work, because as a Jew, as a gay person, as an artist, there are so few places for me to go in safety. But this has to work. I have a big investment in America. Well, I didn't even think about that until now, but there you have it. Well. Send your donations to me.
www.janisian.com. Janis, I could be here for hours. Our time is up, and I definitely want you to sing. So I just want to say this to you. You know, I took it from one of your songs, the chapter actually, This Train Still Runs, and I wanted to read it. Times when I tried to jump the track, weight of the world upon my back, still after all is said and done, this train still runs. And I just want to thank you, Janis.
It's a
for
pleasure.
keeping the train.
It's a pleasure.
On the
Thanks
track.
for making this so easy.
It's my pleasure. And I want to thank you guys for joining us. Now, before Janis sings, I'd like to leave you with these words from Society's Child. A friend once told me, for people like us, the meaning is in the search for the meaning. Those words had a profound impact on me because they explained my life. I don't really care about arriving. That's what she said earlier. I care about what happens on the path I take to get there. I'm Barry Kibrick. It is all about the search. Search between the lines and you will find meaning on the path you take. And now as she continues on her path, here's Janis Ian with At 17.
I learned the truth at 17, that love was meant for beauty queens and high school girls with clear-skinned smiles who married young and then retired. The Valentines I never knew, the Friday night charades of youth, were spent on one more beautiful. At 17 I learned the truth. And those of us with ravaged faces, lacking in the social graces, desperately remained at home, inventing lovers on the phone who called to say, come dance with me, and murmured vague obscenities. It isn't all it seems at 17. To those of us who knew the pain of Valentines that never came, and those whose names were never called, choosing sites for basketball. It was long ago and far away, and the world was younger than today, when dreams were all they gave for free to ugly duckling girls like me. We all play the game, and when we dare, we cheat ourselves at solitaire, inventing lovers on the phone, repenting other lives unknown. They call and say, come on, dance with me, and murmur vague obscenities at ugly girls like me at 17.
If you'd like a tape of our show or would like to become a member of our book club and receive our weekly email show updates, just write us at barrykibrick@aol.com.